Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osterberg501 and today I want to go over some new information we have gotten for world tiers in Diablo 4. And world tiers are essentially a difficulty setting that will affect the entirety of the world and content in Diablo 4, making all enemies more difficult, but also giving you more and better loot. And world tiers are going to be Diablo 4's version of torment levels from Diablo 3, but they seem to be much more interesting and more substantial. Now there are going to be 5 different world tiers on launch of Diablo 4, and World Tier 1 and World Tier 2 are going to be available for you once you start the game. So World Tier 1 is primarily for newer players or people that just want to focus on consuming the story and don't want to be dying a bunch in between following along with the story. And World Tier 2 is going to be for people that want much more of a challenge while leveling up throughout the game. Now we don't know if there are going to be any experience differences between these first 2 world tiers. So if there's nothing that changes the actual experience gained, I could also see a lot of more experienced players still playing on World Tier 1 just to level up as quickly as possible. But World Tier 2 may also have an increase to the amount of XP you earn, just like it'll be an increase to the quality of loot you're getting. And those are the only 2 world tiers you're going to have access to until you get later into the game, and it was specifically mentioned as probably around level 50 plus, so pretty much the time you're starting into the end game and right around the same time that you're going to be done with the main campaign. And getting to that point, you will then unlock World Tier 3, which is what's considered to be the first end game world tier. And again, every new world tier level you go up, everything's going to be more difficult, but you're going to be getting more loot. And in all the other Diablo games that have a system like this, you're also getting more gold and usually more experience. And getting up to World Tier 3, you're not going to have to do anything besides just level up. But after you get into World Tier 3, you're going to actually have to do additional pieces of content to unlock the higher world tiers. And this comes in the form of a new boss at the end of every world tier. Now, I don't exactly know how the new world tiers are going to be unlocked. It sounds like they're going to continue to be going off of levels. So maybe you have to get to like level 60 or 70 or something to be able to go into World Tier 4. So not exactly sure how that's going to work, but you're also going to have to defeat that world tier's end boss to unlock the next world tier. So depending on how it works, you do whatever you need to do to then get to that world tier's end boss. Then you have to kill that world tier's end boss, and that will unlock you the next world tier. And these bosses are said to be pretty difficult. They're essentially a challenge to show that you're ready for that next world tier. And I'm a really big fan of this system. I think having more very difficult bosses and challenges to continue progressing in the game is a good thing. It challenges your build to actually let you know if you should actually be in that next world tier. And I think it makes you think a little bit more about creating your build, because that build is not only going to have to be good at playing the general content of the game and most likely be somewhat efficient at clearing out tons of enemies, but your build's also going to need to be able to defeat a very difficult boss. So you're going to have to defeat the boss at the end of World Tier 3 and at the end of World Tier 4 to get into the highest World Tier on launch, which is going to be World Tier 5. Now World Tier 5 is going to take you to level 100, but there is also going to be a level 100 boss at the end of World Tier 5, which sounds like it's going to be the absolute pinnacle, hardest challenge in Diablo 4 on launch. And they also mentioned that this boss is going to be extremely difficult, so probably even much more difficult than the previous bosses you had to defeat. And since it's level 100, this is probably going to require that you have optimized gear. You're level 100, so you're going to have all your skill points, all of your Paragon points, and you're going to need a very well put together build to go defeat this boss. And like I mentioned, I'm a very big fan of a system like this, especially having a boss that is not to go unlock more world tiers. This boss is literally just there to test your build at the very, very end game. And one of the things I am curious about is how the world tier system is going to interact with the world bosses. So in the launch of Diablo 4, it has been announced that there will be 3 world bosses. We have seen 2 of these world bosses in officially released footage. And these world bosses are massive open world bosses that once you come across, you'll need a group of players to actually kill, or at least that's what they're being designed around to be. Now you don't have to group up because you will see other players just out in the open world. So most likely players will start just showing going up to do the boss with everybody else that's there. And these bosses are actually so big that it actually pulls your camera back to be able to fight it more effectively. And all of these world bosses do seem to be lower level bosses, or at least are able to be fought at lower levels. Now, with world tiers scaling up the entirety of the world, these world bosses will be scaled up as well, but I'm curious if these are going to become something that's incredibly difficult at, say, world tier 5, and may give you a ridiculous amount of loot. Especially one world boss that has actually been shown off in a lot of footage and the full fight has been shown, and that's the big gold boss that comes out of a gold portal, and he has the big golden chest on a chain that he swings around. And the reason for this boss specifically is because this boss also will randomly spawn loot goblins during that fight. So not only, say, if you're in world tier 5 would you be facing this big world boss that could potentially drop just tons of loot, but you're also going to be getting loot goblin spawns during that fight. And if you're in like world tier 5, that would be giving some pretty good loot. Now, progressing through these world tiers is actually going to give more than just giving you more gold, more loot, and higher quality loot. It's actually going to start unlocking you new content and new item types. So first off, something I've gone over before is an endgame system called Helltides, and you unlock these in World Tier 3, and these will take over an entire region of the game when they're active, and it's essentially Lilith's army invading this region, buffing up all creatures in this area, spawning a ton of her strongest soldiers, so there's most likely going to be a bunch of bosses running around, hordes of her armies running around, and running around in this Helltide is going to give you an additional currency that's used on specific Helltide chests in that region when the Helltide is active. And this is the main thing showing that there is probably going to be additional content later down the road in new seasons or new expansions that are also specifically unlocked from being in higher world tiers. Now, going up through these higher world tiers is also going to be very important for gearing, primarily because you're actually going to unlock the ability to earn item tiers called sacred and ancestral items getting into the higher world tiers. Now, I don't know exactly which world tiers you unlock the ability to get these. I'm assuming at world tier 3 you get sacred, and world tier 4 you get ancestral, and then world tier 5 you just get higher chances to get these. But we will be getting these new item tiers. And I actually went over a leak a few weeks ago of some data mined information that also mentioned sacred and ancestral items, so it is now officially revealed that these are going to be things we will be earning in the end game, but we don't know actually what these are. Now, there's a few different theories. These could be similar to items in Diablo 3, where they're essentially just upgraded versions of legendary items. One can roll with higher stats, and then the next one is guaranteed maxed rolled stats. But because of how they talked about it in this developer interview, I think these are actually going to be a little bit more than that, because they specifically mentioned these as giving you new exciting features or new exciting powers. So I'm thinking these are probably going to add some end game specific powers to them, or maybe some additional affix rolls. But it's seeming like these are going to be a bit more than just additional stats on items we already have. And building on top of that, there are actually specific items themselves that can only drop in higher world tiers. And a lot of other ARPG games do this as well, where once you get into the highest difficulties of the game, there are some very rare, unique, or legendary items that you can only get in higher world tiers. So probably once you get in like world tier 3, 4, and 5, you are going to unlock some additional legendary and unique items that can only be obtained in those higher world tiers and are probably going to be much more rare and probably very sought after items to go and chase. And with this new information, I think it's a pretty good chance we're probably going to end up getting new world tiers in future seasons, specifically because of how they've talked about pinnacle level challenges in new seasons, and because of how they're talking about these world tier bosses. And if you've watched any of my videos that go over season content, you would know that every season is going to have some pinnacle level challenge at the end that's extremely difficult, that's going to earn you some season specific rewards. And I think there's a pretty good chance that this could potentially be new world tier end bosses. So say for a new season, we get up to world tier 6, and going through that new world tier and then getting to that end boss and defeating that end boss, that would be the pinnacle level challenge for that season that would earn you new season specific cosmetics or different very rare items. That's a way I think they could very much go about this because of how they're explaining these world tier end bosses. But that's pretty much all the new information we we got on world tiers. And I think this is a pretty big upgrade compared to what we were thinking world tiers were before. Because before this information, most people were just thinking that these were going to be Diablo 4's version of torments that are essentially you just increase the difficulty to get more loot, and there really wasn't going to be much else tied to it. But knowing there's actually going to be very difficult end bosses you have to defeat to get into new world tiers, knowing you're going to be able to get new item tiers and new specific unique items from the higher world tiers, I think this system is much more fleshed out and more interesting than other difficulty increasing systems. But that's all I want to go over, so subscribe if you want to see more Diablo 4 or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video, leave a comment down below what you guys think about all this new world tier information, and thanks for watching.